Great old song sung there by the South Point Quartet. And what a wonderful song it is, talking about one of the great men of God who God used greatly in the Old Testament. His name was Moses. And Moses was a great leader of God. He had been chosen by God to lead his people, the nation of Israel, out of the bondage of Egypt and back towards the promised land. And what a job he did. When the people said, let's stop, let's go back, Moses said, just keep going. A great leader continues to encourage the people of God to move forward. That God has a plan for them. He has a promise for them. And he has a place prepared for them. And that leader just says, keep on going. Don't turn back. 40 years they wandered in the wilderness as God prepared them for the promised land. Moses would not see it. He could think of it, know it was close at hand, but because of disobedience, Moses would never enter in to the promised land. But he was a great leader of God. As Moses was a great leader in the Old Testament, the Apostle Paul is a man that we think about from the New Testament who was a great spokesman for God. Now, I believe these two men give us a picture today as Christians of what we should be doing as we go with God in his plan, in his purpose, headed to that place that he has prepared for us. We should be leading other men and women, boys and girls, to know that God has a plan and to encourage them to keep going. Oh, there'll be difficulties in these days, but we must keep going. And the leader of Christians today must be constantly reminding them of who God is and what he has done mighty in your path and in your way, and how he'll overcome the enemy if you will just keep on going. And then when we come to that New Testament man, the Apostle Paul, the great spokesman of God, the man who would probably do more to encourage people through his words, letters, and the spoken word of how Christians ought to live in these days, not only following God, but also he's to speak to them, encouraging them, and helping them along the way. The Apostle Paul was the man who wrote to the Romans in chapter 1, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God unto salvation to the Jew first, and also to the Greek." Jews and Gentiles, men and women, boys and girls who are alive in the earth today should be encouraged by those who are Christians as we tell them of that which God has done for us and what he wants to do as he leads us on to that place that he has prepared for us to spend eternity with him. That place has been prepared for all who will put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And Paul was the spokesman of God in the New Testament, just like Moses was the leader of God in the Old Testament. And we too must be leading others in the way God would have them to go, and telling others of how good God is and what he wants to do for them in these days. I hope you are a good leader and a good spokesman to others who may not know our God, those who may not walk with him as closely as they could. Let's be encouraging them, and let's continue to tell them, and let's continue to lead them by our examples as we go through this life. Well, it's a good song that we heard today, encouraging those children to keep on going, even in difficulty. Let's encourage people to keep on going. And Paul's saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Let's not be ashamed of the gospel of God in these days. Let's stand firm for what God has said, what he's planning for those who trust in him, and what he is going to have with and for us for all eternity as we spend that time with him. Well, I'm glad you joined me today, and I hope you've been encouraged a little bit by what we've said and by the song. And I hope that you'll remember those two great men, Moses in the Old Testament leading, Paul in the New Testament speaking and telling others about what God wants to do in their lives if they'll but turn it over to him. Have a good day, and join me next time right here when we have encouragement with the Johnsons. Bye-bye.